We're talking about what it means to be Black, LGBTQ, and Muslim. And we have a very special guest to discuss this with us, Kuji Mah Ajani. How are you?
How are you? I'm well. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's get right into it.
Okay.
Tell us, what were your early years like, and when did you recognize you were attracted to men?
My earlier life in the Washington, D.C. area that I can remember is, being a child of a single mother. I grew up in an all-women household in the earlier days, strong Black women. My mom was the middle child who was the black sheep of the family that was out. She was community, what's the best word I can say this? She's a community activist and radical in the context of Blackness, right? In that time frame. But she was just a party goer. She did her thing. And she had me at an early age, and I ended up spending most of my early years around my grandmother. But as I grew up, I started to notice my attraction for men. It was very early, with a different special feeling that I had for men that I didn't have for women. And before anyone could assess, oh, the reason why you're gay or you're feminine more because you didn't have any men in the household. That is furthest from the truth. I had uncles. I had stepfathers, I had other people that were influential in my life. But I can also say there were other things that played a part in my life to shape and mold me to know who I was. Um, the earliest moment I remember is one of my mom's closest friends, a young person, about not too far from my age, when I was like 10 or 11, I had a huge crush on. I would be home. This is the time where we had Quiet Storms with Melvin Lindsay, who at that time I didn't know was gay yet. But he had this lovely show on 96.3 HWHUR, and they would play love songs. So I spent a lot of evenings just daydreaming of what a relationship would look like with them, right? Or with this person.
Wow.
I just loved him. Anytime he came around, I just adored him. And then I found another boyfriend in my dreams. You know what I'm saying? It just escalated into that. And so, I started to dive that deeper into the actual act of engaging with the partner. Um, but yeah, my life in DC was an early time where you felt like what was happening with Black folks. It was a time where 14th and U, 14th and W was considered a red zone because there were so many people. I was like 5 years old, and I would walk down with my mom to this area, and it would be hundreds of people every day, all day long, 7 days a week, all night long, just humming the streets. I think this was the time where the heroin epidemic was very popular. There was a
Mm.
lot of number running pimps, prostitutes, sex workers, a lot of drugs, a lot of things were active in this area. Most folks don't even remember or know that this was to be the case. And this is shy of 14th and W, 14th and V, and 14th and U. So I got a chance at a young age to see Blackness and entirely from music to every kind of thing, from culture to everything, in the good way and in a bad way. As I grew up, I lived different places. My grandmother died when I was close to 5 years old. So my
Mhm.
mom did come back to the home to kind of take care of me. She kind of got me together and we ended up living from place to place. And that looked very different than normal Black families that I knew in those days, which meant we stayed from family member to family member that had different religious beliefs. So religion became a scary thing for me. And by the time I was a teenager, I had understood that if you were a Baptist, you went to church on Sundays.
Right.
If you were like Baptist Christian, you went to church on Sunday. And any other religion was wrong and going to hell. And then we would live here for 5, 6 months for various different reasons. And then we would end up at another family member's house that was Jehovah's Witness. And you had to go to the kingdom. You had to go to Bible study on Wednesday, which is similar to Bible study in Christian settings, but you had Bible study in the Jehovah's Witness community, but you then also went to service, I think it's on Friday or Saturday. And then we left that home and we went to a home that didn't really have any religious beliefs, right? Before we went to live in a shelter kind of thing. But I learned, that in those households that I was going to experience a level of discrimination because I knew that I was different. They knew I was different, and I didn't fit the norm as a boy. I didn't do what normal boys did. I didn't like basketball. I didn't like football. I like boxing, but I didn't like basketball or football, but no one knew that. Um, so I would hear comments of, like this boy gonna go up gay. He a faggot, you know what I'm saying? And I
Right.
was treated as such. And God doesn't like gay people, or you need to toughen up. You need to get that together because you're not gonna be around me like this. And this is family members talking to me. And so, which is one of the reasons why my mom moved me from place to place a few times, is because she could feel, or she knew that the level of respect wasn't there. And was from elders. But when you live in someone's household, that pay for you to stay there, they get to dictate and tell you how to live and how you should be.
While you navigated this with your mother did try to protect you emotionally the best way that she could.
She did. We struggled too with my sexuality when it was confirmed in later years. But as a young mother, I was her child. My mom would do anything for me. She loved me. But she also was a woman of color struggling to find her way in the world with a little bit of no education. Of course, this is in the early 80s. My mom was a gifted singer. The thing I could tell you the most is that, and anyone who knew me from those early days, and my other family members, my mother could sing a Patti LaBelle song and transfer over and sing Tina Marie and mimic everything they did. So she was gifted, and she aspired or wanted to be an artist, but she never had the opportunity to do so, because what we did learn about my mother in the early years is when I was about 7, there was 8 of us that lived in a 1-bedroom apartment that she took care of, and she didn't have a job. My mom went in the street, she did sex work, she sold drugs, she did whatever she had to do to make sure that myself, her older sisters, family members had food. My cousins that came from down south had food and had a place to stay, including herself. And she did whatever she had to do. So I learned loving family in a different context than most folks. I learned community activism in a different context than most folks. But she did what she had to do. And she had a big dream to be an artist, and it never manifested for her. And I think that hurt a lot. But, she made the choice that she made, and she lived with it.
How did, number one, how were you affected by, what you were learning about religion, basically that God did not love you because of this part of yourself? And then also, what were your interactions like with your uncles and your stepdads?
I never had consensual relationships with men in my family. There were 2 things that I will not touch about right now. One, well, I can tell about one. I was molested by a family member
Okay.
the day of my grandmother's funeral. I'm
Wow.
going to stamp that because that's a public information for sure. But there are other things that I won't talk about because I've chosen to do this interview and to have this information out in the world in a way in which that it will probably land wherever it lands. But those family members who I'm not directly connected to may not even like me. We don't disagree. I mean, we don't have a close friendship or connection. But one thing I will always do is recognize that my family is poor, and they don't have the power to hide from anything that I say that I experience, whether it's the truth or not. So I would not put them in a situation where people will bully or oppress them or treat them any differently, right? I've chosen to do this interview, so I won't discuss certain things in that regard for the respect and the love that I do have for my family. Again, whether we connect or we talk. What I can say is my uncles on my mother's side of the family, they were my grandmother's brothers. They treated my mother very different. They treated her harsh because my mother was very direct. I think I get that from her. She said what was on her mind, and if it was wrong, it was wrong. And so she was considered the black sheep of the family. And so when she wasn't around, whatever animosity or feelings they had towards her, they projected on me. They shunned me, right? I think it also has a little bit to do that I was different. I was also, believe it or not, the light-skinned person of the family. I was the only male grandchild, or the only grandchild, male person in that generation of bloodline, outside of my uncles who were older. And I was also fairly light skinned. So, I don't know if it was what we would call the colorism of house nigger syndrome for them. But my grandmother, who was a Native American, she also was a little light skinned. So I don't know. But I know that I felt a lot of negative connotations from them because of my mother. They would say certain things as well. My stepfather's side of the family, as I got older, my stepfather wasn't around, and my uncle, and this is a documentary that I think will come out later on in the future too, that we discussed this, and I can share that with you. But my uncle, who I never met, I was about 11 years old, and it was like 1986. I never met this uncle. I have heard things about him, but I never in my entire life met him. He was incarcerated the whole time that I was born, basically. And my mom got this call, and she passed me the phone. She was like, "Someone wants to speak to you," and she has this little smirk on her face, and I'm like, "What's going on? What's going on here?" And so I was like, "Hello," and just I'm saying hello with this curious like wonder of what's happening here, right? Who is on this other end? And I'm thinking it could be in my mind the only person possibly is my father or somebody. And this voice on the other end was like, "What's up, Lord Mike?" Because I was born named after my stepfather. And I'm like, "Hi." You know what I'm saying? Like, who are you? And it was like, "I'm your Uncle Nate." And I'm like, "Okay." He was like, hey man, I want to see you." And I'm like, "Okay." And here in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, is this going to be another situation of an uncle who's going to try to come into my life and make me a man, make me something different? So I didn't know what to think or what to feel. And I was like, okay. So I was kind of like, okay, this is weird, but all right. I didn't really trip off of it. I think it was like could be about a week later. Um, there's a knock at the door, and it's him, my uncle. And he was like, "I'm your Uncle Nate." He's this tall guy, and he's lean, lean built, just very, very attractive. And I'm just mesmerized because I'm this little dude, right, looking up at this man. And he seemed so gigantic, but assertive, and he is coming to see me. So he picks me up and, he gives me a hug and, I grab my bag and my mom gives me a bag to go away. I go away for the weekend with him. And he intentionally takes me over to my grandmother's house, whose home I've been to before, and a few times. And he has a son as well, who was my cousin that I knew. And he is basically trying to get us all young kids on cousins together so that we may know each other. And he did a wonderful job with that. That was the first time that any Black male man showed me that much love.
And how old were you?
11. And it was so powerful and moving that I stay with me to this day. That I talked about it in a documentary. I'm going to talk about it in my book, that he was a man of the streets. And I do that by every insult. To this day, my uncle don't go for nothing. He can call me and say, "Hey man, don't make me come out there." And he's an older man. And if he say it that way, you understand the seriousness of what he's saying. It's not that he's trying to be oppressive or anything. You understand the language. You understand the love that's in that phrase. Like, I haven't seen you. I don't know what's going on with you, but don't make me come out there. We imply that as you're going to come out here and hurt me. Yeah, possibly, but it's coming from a root of love. It's the truth. Right. Like, you know me. You know you know how I get down. You know what I'll do. So don't make me come out there because it's not going to end well. You know what I'm saying? And it's not that he doesn't wish for me well or he's trying to control me. He's saying stay connected.
Yeah.
This is what family looks like. He was the first person also to show me what love looks like, despite who you were as a Black boy. And he knew from my dad that I was different.
Mm.
And he told me, "I don't care what you become in this world. You never let anybody chump you. You never let anybody take your pride. You never let anybody control you or abuse you. You stand up, and because if I come around and I find out that you did, we're gonna have problems." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I got that. I didn't understand it then, but I got it years later. And so he was one of the first people that showed me love and know that also it's possible for Black men who are different, who are heterosexual, to love you despite who you are, despite you being different. And it also can be a teacher for you in your world and your life. So I learned from him, most importantly, how to survive these streets of DC. And that those skill sets apply to the professional world. It applied to any facet of my life, and he taught them to me, as well as my dad did too. So I found love through him that to this day will take me to my grave, and it changed my perception of what family looks like, because we both struggled with how families show up for us. And he loves hard. He, in the
Mm-hmm.
core of his heart, he's ruthless, but his family is his weakness. And that means anybody. He's older now, but if I call him and said I'm having a problem, trust and believe nothing's going to stop him from getting to me. And anybody who tried to do anything to disturb my peace, there's going to be problems. And that's a love that I never had besides my mom, you know? So yeah, that is my uncle in that regard, shaped and molded me. I've had other uncles in the family in different settings that showed up, but never like Uncle Nate.
What prevents more men in our communities from being able to see those little boys who are different and be able to embrace them and recognize that even though they may be gay or bisexual, that doesn't stop them from being a man or make them less worthy of love?
From my experience and what I think is education, what we're taught that religion and God is.
Mm.
It starts with some generational knowledge of information. Um, I cannot deny the fact that a lot of Black men have lacked the knowledge to know their own history that predates being slaves here in the U.S. And so they are a product of what they've been taught and told to believe. They also spin the coin that, slave masters would, rape men, devaluize them, devalue them. And that's a true thing. But they also hold that as the reason why homosexuality exists, as if they are the creators of this. And that is the reason why Black men love each other the way they do, because their master in some way has raped them or penetrate them in a way that they learn to find love in that, right? I didn't have a slave master. You know what I'm saying? I was naturally wired this way. I know what I'm attracted to and I know what I'm not attracted to. There was nothing that happened to me. In fact, the first person that molested me was a female, to be exact.
Mm.
That's a whole nother conversation. So we can dissect this if we want to, but what's rooted in the reality, and it's going to go, this interview may go different ways and a lot of people may have a problem with it, but
That's
the
fine.
creator is not of any gender. The creator is not of any gender, and the creator created all kinds of things that are not seen in this world and that were created before this world and humanity. We know not, right? And so the true test for humanity and people is, if you say you love the creator with all of your heart, how can you hate some of its creation? And if you can't pass this test, you really can't pass the test of things outside of this world. You can't fully love the creator if you can't love all of what is created. And then don't get me wrong, there's some gigantic things in the world. I'm not saying I can go and I'm gonna love and hug on an octopus or a lion. But if I can't have love in my heart for that life source that's within that thing, then I can't have true love for the creator. And so that's something that men never had a chance to dissect and process because they were living in their struggles and their traumas.
Let's go right to the trauma. Let's go right to that. It's important that we do that because you
Okay.
mentioned that you were sexually abused by a woman. The funny thing about that is there are a lot of men in our community who would think that's okay.
We can tie this conversation to a little booty.
Who threatened to buy a sex worker or prostitute for his son if his son was
Let's
gay.
let's be clear. He did do that, right?
I don't know if I
I
think
think
he
we,
did say he did it.
Yeah, something happened with some prostitute and kids or something. But there's a real conversation needs to be had. And I think the reason why we're not having it is because people hate us. For whatever reason, they do not accept the reality that we do matter and we
Yeah,
are right
people fear what they don't understand.
for what they do understand and just can't live out through themselves.
Well,
So there's a lot of things that have played out in history that we know and God knows, right? Where folks live a certain kind of life, and they condemned us to publicly be all of who we are. But behind the closed doors, they want to do what they want to do, right?
yeah.
So
Kuji, what made you comfortable with your sexuality, especially coming up where you came from and the way that you grew up with religion and these different variables that challenged you? What made you or allowed you to be comfortable with who you are?
it was reading a lot of spiritual texts to find out if I mattered, if I existed. It was looking at history and learning about Andre Lord and learning about Marsha P. Johnson and the rest of the crew and everyone else, and James Baldwin and Langston Hughes, and taking and drawing strength from them to realize that I matter. Because at the core of my heart, I didn't believe like I belonged because I didn't see James Baldwin. I didn't see all of the scholars at the forefront of anything. So I thought we just existed, but we didn't have any value in changing the narrative of this world. And we really did because we were the forefront of it. Without us, then none of this shit would have happened. So what I started to do was walk with purpose, walk understanding that nobody can take away my rights. My folks helped shape the mold for your ass to be where you are, and you will never tell me otherwise, right? I had knowledge now. I didn't have the knowledge then. And most importantly, I had to spend a lot of evenings and nights alone with God. That now, most importantly, it's not about getting on a platform and debating with people about text and knowledge. It's about having a relationship with God and doing that is most important, and that's loving with people, feeding people.
You talked about needing to really be with God and really, God helping you accept yourself, which is powerful. How did that lead you into transitioning into uh, Islam? Because Islam is arguably considered one of the most homophobic religions. So how did that happen?
So if every religion is considered homophobic, Islam in its core means peace.
Yes.
If anyone researched that term, Islam, it means peace. The purpose of why I accepted Islam, it was never forced on me. I'm gonna be very real with you. I was in DC and you know exactly where this area is. Georgia Avenue and Florida Avenue, right on the corner from where the Popeyes chickens used to be. There was a Muslim store, and I would go there to get my black soap and my incense. And so this one particular day, I went there, and there was this brother. He was a dark skin. I think he was from Nigeria. No, Senegal. He was dark skinned. He had all black. He had a kufi on, and he was dealing with a customer. And after that, ringing up my soap and all that, he was like, "How you doing, brother?" And I was just talking with him, rapping. And it was, I was like, "Why are you a Muslim? Tell me a little bit about that." And before you know it, I took Shahada, which is declaring, God of the gods and all that stuff. Folks think that this is a ritual. Folks think that Shahada is basically part of some voodoo kind of thing that once you repeat it, it locks you into something, and now you're stuck there and you're going to go to hell. Shahada is basically acknowledging and professing that God, Allah, which has 1,000 names, God has 1,000 names before Allah and what we call Jesus and Jehovah, 1,000 names, and he answers to them all, or the answers to them all, because again, God is not of gender. But I took Shahada. I was moved by that because it was out of love that he presented this to me. He didn't force me into anything. He gave me a kufi, he gave me an incense and black soap for free. And I went back with all of my difficulties that I was holding inside of me that I was living with at that time. The struggles with substance and gender and all those things. The only thing I was doing was going to the club every other weekend, right? That was my focus of life. This person enlightened and awakening something inside of me that was very different. Although I had my spiritual father, Ibrahim Faraj, although I had the Greg Hutchins and my brother, big brother Aaron Ward, all these people, this ignited something in me different that I had no idea about. And it was something spiritual. I would go back home, I had my Quran and I had all the information I needed, and I would nudge at it briefly every now and then because I was not fully committed. I wasn't too sure because, again, I was afraid of all of the political people and all of the stuff that you heard about Muslims. Because, again, the mass media made it very clear Muslim was bad. In the movies that you see play out, Islam and Muslims are bad. They are always here to blow up something. They mean good. They are homophobic. They all that. And that's not the case. That is truly not the case. So I was apprehensive. And then 9/11 happened less than 3 weeks later.
Mm.
And then I recluse. I couldn't do anything. I was afraid to wear Muslim kufi. I was afraid to do anything because I was not sure where I stood with Islam, and I wasn't sure where I stood with Muslims. So I struggled yet again for several years. And then I came here to look at seminary school. And my spiritual father was a Muslim, and I loved and trusted everything about him. So that was an opportunity for me to step back into my Islam and to step back into knowledge and information. I had a lot of conversations with him because he was a historian. He was also a religious scholar. He spoke 19 languages. He'd done a lot of great work in DC that most people don't even understand or know about. And so these were things that I trusted in because I have to have facts. I'm just not going to walk and believe something without any proof to it. I've witnessed that already. And what continuously attracted me to Islam was love. The community showed me love. I saw love in the information that I was receiving, the conversations that I was having, right? And so that allowed me to dive deeper and to harness my spiritual practice for myself. It was never about anyone else. It was about my relationship with God. Me fasting, me praying 5 times a day was a good thing for me. It was not because I'm ordered to do so. Fasting purifies the body. Most times people don't even understand that fasting is something that is beneficial for you if you have heart disease, kidney failure, any kinds of issues, right? Your liver is failing on you. By the time you're in your mother's womb, your immune system is processing, you're eating. You never give your kidneys, your liver, any of these things a break to rest. Everything needs rest. So fasting is a purification. It's a healing component to it as well. It also is an enlightening thing for those who identify as a Sufi Muslim. That's a whole nother conversation, right? So this was a good thing for me. The 5 times of prayers was being reminded that God is present at all times and everywhere, being humble. There's a conversation about the angels to the left and to the right of you. So being mindful of those things too. This is not to scare you, or it's not to make you act in a phony way and not live out your truth. It's to be mindful that you are always being seen, and how you show up is being somewhere recorded in some kind of way or another, right? But this is also to help guide you in some ways. The 5 times a day prayers was a way to keep me humble. It was a way to control the anger and rage that I had and I struggled with for being abused by family members, from being oppressed by the systems that be, right? And being able to be imprisoned within this world and understand that this world, for those who wish better for us, we're in prison. They say, if you like this world the most, then you are not about justice. You're not about healing the earth. You're not about healing others. And so I recognize that I wanted to be of use for my community in different ways. Not be better, but be of use. But I also recognize that this world will eat you up as many times as it can. So it taught me how to be at peace and to see things bigger than what I knew. Because I used to be quick to respond to homophobic men of color, right? Christians. I'm gonna go back at you, right? But I had to step back and see their trauma, see their fears. So my 5 times a day prayers kept me humbled, kept me at peace. I wasn't always perfect, but that's what something I did. So that's why I was attracted to Islam. But also Islam talks about not erasing someone else's religious belief and not condemning them for having different religious beliefs. And it's not saying that they're going to go to hell. Because, in fact, Islam is telling you to support and love your brothers that are different from you. So I never got this hateful message or information from Islam in any kind of way. So I was attracted to the Quran, and it made sense. I didn't read something that seemed very complicated, and I had to go and dive up here and read five different other books to make sense of this passage. The Quran was very detailed in some way to me, right? It made sense. And I was reading it with an open heart, not a stern eye, looking for errors, looking for problems. So that's what attracted me. And then I just love the purification of it all. I love the practice of showing up in community. And don't get me wrong. I also seen a lot of the things that I disliked about Islam and the separation, the colorism, the betterness, the privilege. They exist there in Islam, but it's not Islam, it's the people.
Yeah.
Islam has nothing to really do. People mask that and they hold on to that, but Islam is not the problem, it's the people. So I had to separate the two. My also my times living temporarily in Istanbul, right? Visiting Konya, seeing different places in India that had different viewpoints and views, and the love that I've shown or saw people, and also most importantly, seeing all of the other LGBTQI people who are within Islam.
People, are they openly LGBTQ and practicing in Istanbul and all these other places?
Of course, there are some folks that's openly about it. Again, we live in a culture where you can't do but so much. The U.S. is probably one of those countries where you can be very vocal and free, but you have to be mindful in other areas, right, within other people in different countries. But they do this work. They are actively open in some ways or another. The question is, where are they? There is a openly gay Muslim, forgive me for butchering his name, by way of, I think he's from Morocco, if I'm not mistaken. He lives probably somewhere in Australia now. He was exiled, because he spoke up. Yeah, they're active. They're out there. They've always been out there, even in some parts of Africa. They may not be Muslims, but they are activists, right? They're doing this work. The problem is they're killed, right? Or they don't have the support that they should have to be visible and still speaking out and doing the different kind of work they need to do as far as providing safe space for other LGBTQI people. But they exist.
As a Black Muslim here in America, what have been some of your experiences being, openly LGBTQ in the faith and interacting with particularly your Muslim brothers?
I can tell you there's a body language and there's a look that a lot of some of my Muslim, I won't say a lot, some of my Muslim brothers I've interacted with. And that's all over the US because that's where they are. And then there's a lot of them that accept me for who I am and love me regardless. The problem is not always me. It's about whether or not the rest of my trans sisters who are visibly trans can step into a space and still be accepted, right? Yeah. It's about whether we can have real conversations about this and someone's publicly saying, you are welcome here. All of you is welcome here. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for you to just say, okay, come show up and pray. But also on the flip side to that, I do believe that there's a time and place for everything. I want you to show up and pray and be for you in your spiritual practice and not about what you really are, because who you are is okay. I do have a trans a sister now transitioning from a male to female, that struggles with some of the conversations, right? And so I'm supportive to that. There's a way in which that you have to go to the Hajj and look, right? You can't go to different countries and want to be all of who you are because they don't understand. And the question you have to ask yourself between you and Allah is, why are you there at the pilgrimage? Why are you there at Hajj? Are you there for yourself, or are you there for the spiritual and the spiritual blessing that can come from that? So prioritization is a very key, important piece. But that doesn't mean you can't come back here and be an activist and be very visible in the work that you should be doing as far as being there for everyone.
For LGBTQ people who are in Muslim spaces and others who either are trying to understand it or don't understand it, how do we make these spaces safer to have the conversation about the existence of LGBTQ Muslims?
I think, like I said, Iman Dei Abdul and other queer Muslims, they are there to kind of create these spaces. And I think there needs to be more visibility around that, where we bring together those who have had experiences like I have to speak about what's not working for them. And also, how do we build mosques and spaces for safe spaces for LGBT people to show up. There's some communities that you can find on Facebook. They do exist. You just don't hear about them a lot. And I think one of the reasons why is because they would probably be harassed or attacked.
They would be considered haram.
Haram.
Yeah.
In the eyes of those who are uneducated.
Okay.
So just like Christians, it's a sin, but it wasn't sin to eat that shellfish, was it? It wasn't sin.
Some of the Muslims be sneaking eating them pork chop sandwiches.
Well, I'll tell you this: there are different kinds of Muslim communities. So I want to share some things like that. So even in Islam, you have Sufism, which is a community of Muslims that believe in mysticism and magic and other things, right? And so there are a whole group of Muslims who condemn us, right? Mm-hmm. But even in that, you have different communities of Islam, right? And Muslims. For example, my lineage is the Chisi lineage. Muhyiddin Chisi derives from India. He's the founding father. He's said to be the friend of the poor. I was given that name in what we call Bayat, which is a name and ceremony with my dad, and I didn't understand it. And I was like, I'm a whore. I'm a drug. I'm smoke weed. I can't do this. You're giving me a name of someone so high status that I love and I appreciate. But what I've learned is that I would later live into my name of being a friend of the poor, being about justice. I didn't understand it, and I'm like, okay, maybe this was spiritually divine in some way. And I didn't have to change me. I could still be all of who I need to be. There are all other kinds of communities who fall through on some things. For example, there's a community of Muslims called Baktashis. They drink. And the purpose of why they drink is because if you are a Muslim that studied the Quran and really dived into what Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, and his family has said, then you would know that you don't judge anyone else. And so it's a test for other Muslims who go around and judge others. They may not fit the norm of what you do. So there's a lot of different folks in different communities of Islam that have different purposes or have joined a different particular lineage to live out who they are, who they were designed to be, or who they have accepted themselves to be. One key other point to understand about Islam is that every lineage, every sheikh that exists has a teacher that was a sheikh that exists way back then that connects all the way to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family. So there's no breakage there. I couldn't come up and just say, oh, I'm going to be a sheikh tomorrow. No, I have to have a teacher that's connected to a teacher, that's connected to a teacher, that's connected to a teacher, that goes all the way back to the very beginning of when Prophet Muhammad began the whole community in which that we have today. That's not found in other religious communities. So it kind of leaves room for misinformed information. You do have people that are out here that gives other or present other information, but is it valid? In some Islamic communities, no, because if their sheikh, if it's not connected to their sheikh, that's not connected to another sheikh, that goes all the way back to their stages, it's not valid.
Last question.
Okay.
So for LGBTQ Muslims, if you could share any words of encouragement about what this journey looks like, or despite the challenges that do come with this faith walk, what encouragement or words of wisdom or insight would you share?
Search within, stay the course. Ask yourself, what is it that you're in this field for? What is your practice needs to you? Find community of those that are different from you, not just within Islam, to help form and shape you to be all of who you need to be, and to sustain yourself within this community. What is your calling? I was called to this. This was not something I just said, oh, I'm just going to be a Muslim. I was called to it. I was pulled into it. Some people will disagree with that. If you're called to Islam, there's most likely something that you're supposed to do within that. It may be radical. It may be that different change. You may be the one that is called to step up to change the conversation and a narrative in a different way, that it calls for you to be at the forefront and be hated. I learned something else within seminary school, that if I'm not disturbing the peace, then I'm not doing God's work. I'm not doing Allah's work. So we are supposed to always be changing the narrative, always changing the conversation. And so if you are tapping into any religious community or path, whether it's Islam or whatever that is, you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose there? What is your goal? What is your mission? What is this going to do for you and your community? You know, and most importantly, if it's you're stepping into Islam to heal yourself, that's good too. One of the things that also I had to share with people is that what jihad means. Jihad, and many times people think is about blowing up something, and or war. The jihad, or what jihad implies, is that it's the war against yourself. So you
Mm,
have to go within and work on all of the things that's wrong with you or that you struggle with, and so that you can get to this comfortable place of acceptance of yourself. And so, if that's why you're on the path of Islam, it could be there. You know, it could be that you're being used to do some further work. The last thing I'll say is sometimes the only Quran or Bible anyone reads is your lived experiences. Someone may see you and decide that I'm going to further whatever I'm called to do by how you show up in the world. So if you're drawn to Islam, you're drawn to any other faith, ask yourself why, sit with that. If you don't know, find some mentors, find more than one mentor as well, you know, and sit with the information that you're given, you know, pray, whatever that looks like for you. You know, you don't have to be perfect at it. You know, you don't have to. For some in Islam, they, oh my God, you got to pray every 5 times. I'm like, well, here's the thing about praying every five times a day, and here's the thing about, you know, purification. Not all poor people are able to do that, right? They're living within their stressful situations the way they had to get to work here, or they're going to do that, right? They don't have the luxury to do what you do, right? And so do what you can, meet God where you can, and be sincere in your heart with it, right? At the end of the day, there's a say that we're going to all have our day with God. And so I don't know what that day looks like, but I hope I did everything I could, the best way I could, with love on my tongue to help people. You know, that's it. So if that matters to you or to them, that is it. Find out what your purpose is in this.